the Kentucky Wildcats preview video. Chris, I'll get us started here talking a little bit about Kentucky's offense. All right, Mark Stoops made a bold proclamation last year after the Georgia game. Right, basically he said, "Hey, if we want to start beating them, we gotta start shelling out some money." Well, in this offseason, he put his money where his mouth was. Okay, and Kentucky should be feeling pretty damn good about themselves coming into this year, I think. Look, Liam Cohen's gone, but Kentucky brings in Bush Hamden from Boise State to be their offensive coordinator. By the way, the Broncos actually had a top 30 offense last year. Okay, so they got another favorable offensive coordinator. To me, this offense, it starts and it ends with quarterback Brock Vandagriff, who transferred over from Georgia. Now listen, Vandagriff as a prospect was a 5-star quarterback in the state of Georgia, right? And he set multiple Georgia high school records in terms of throwing the football. So Kentucky fans, just know you got a good one throwing the football for you, right? He had to sit behind, again, Stetson Bennett. He had to sit behind Carson Beck last year. And so he's not talented, obviously. He just, didn't really get enough of a shake at it. And so now he's gone somewhere else. Running back Ray Davis, their do-it-all guy for him last year, Chris. He's gone. But they do bring in Demonte Trainum from Ohio State. He played sparingly, all right, but the Buckeyes had one of the best running back rooms in the country last year, right? He still managed to put up over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns in a very limited role with them last year. So he's going to be a pretty good running back for him. Also, I think Kentucky has 2 really good wide receivers. Their receiver room is pretty good. Dane Key and Barry and Brown, they combined for 1,300 yards and 11 touchdowns last year. Again, I think that'll be the case. I think you're going to see Barry and Brown kind of shift in and out from running the football and being like an actual slot to outside threat in the receiver room for him. Offensive line should be pretty good for the Wildcats as well. Again, I think this is an offense that, they don't have that bell cow, I would say, that was Ray Davis back there. But I think they're going to try to dial it up. I think they're going to try to dial it up this year and throw the ball all around the yard, which is going to be good for them, right? And I think we can agree Kentucky spent some money this offseason, and they're going to be a lot better than they were probably last year. Chris, with that being said, I want to throw it over to you. Tell me a little bit about this defense.
Yeah, last season, throw a couple stats at you guys here. They gave up 25.8 points per game. That was 62nd in the country. Not good, not bad, kind of in the middle. The big thing here, though, they gave up, 352 yards per game. But of that 352 yards, 113 of them were on the ground. That was top 30th in the country. So Kentucky, if that doesn't tell you anything, they had a really good run defense last year. The pass defense was kind of questionable at times. But hey, you know what? We're on to this season's 2024, Christian. So as I mentioned, the run defense was great last year, mainly due to, though, that was Deion Walker. That kid was a stud. He was drafted. They don't have him. He accounted for, I think, like 60 tackles, 8 sacks last year. And he was a top, I read that completely wrong. And I apologize, Christian. He was on that defense last year. Those were his stats. He's back again, and he's probably potentially a top 10 draft pick this season. The guy's 6'6", 350 pounds. So that's a big boy, even bigger than you, Christian. Moving on, though. Outside of that, though, they get back their corner, Maxwell Harrison. He had 5 picks. That almost led the country last year. And then they get another Georgia transfer, Jamin Dumas Johnson, who was really good linebacker there. He did play actually quite a bit for Georgia last year. Like you said, they rotate guys in and out. He played quite a bit. And then, they get probably most of that defense back with 7 starters. That's huge. So Kentucky does return, I think, actually overall offense and defense returns like the 7th most production in the country. So that's really, really good on both sides of the ball. And we like that on this show. We talk about that a lot, returning experience. So overall, though, Christian, as I kind of murdered that, I expect the defense to be even better this season. And they're going to have to improve, defensively, especially in the passing department. But I see that happening this year. I do, Christian. So I want to bring up the schedule here. And, this is kind of interesting. I'm going to be really, really shocked and just kind of interested to see what you have, Kentucky going. Vegas has them at 6.5 wins this season, which is, to me, is kind of crazy. I have them going 8-4. I'll start us off here. We got Southern Miss. I expect to win there. South Carolina, I think that could be a sneaky game, but I still lean Kentucky. Then you got the big boys in Georgia, I think that game, honestly, Kentucky's one of the more physical teams. I think you would agree with me in the SEC. I think it'll be a good game for about a half, and then Georgia's going to do what Georgia always does and pound the ball down your throat. So I got a loss there for Kentucky. You got Ohio. That better be a win. You go on the road at Ole Miss. Now, I was back and forth on this game, and I know that sounds crazy. I'm not as high on Ole Miss. I'll just come out and say it, as most people are. Problem is, it's at Ole Miss, and I think that'll be tough for Kentucky. So I do have them dropping that game. It would not shock me, though, if this game goes late into the fourth quarter and it's close. I'm calling it now. Vandy, you better beat Vandy. You got at Florida. Kentucky's owned Florida of late. If we remember last year, you spoke of Ray Davis. He ran for like 300 yards on Florida. I think you remember that game. Christian was crazy. But I have Kentucky winning this one at the Swamp. I do. I think Kentucky's going to be a better team than Florida. You have Auburn. This game is sneaky. I could see Auburn winning this game because it is at the Barn, but I'm going to lean Kentucky again here. But I do think that stretch there is going to be tough between Florida, Auburn, and you got at Tennessee. I have Kentucky dropping the game at Tennessee this season. I do think Tennessee will be a tough team. You got Murray State. That better be a win. You got at Texas. That's a tough one. I have them dropping that game as well. And then you got the rivalry game at the end of the year. You got Louisville. I think Kentucky beats them for a second straight season. So I have overall, like I said, 8-4, Christian. I want to hear your thoughts on Kentucky's schedule this season.
I also have them going 8-4. Great minds think alike. Chris said it best. Look, Georgia, to me, that's the first loss I got. Ole Miss, Texas, and then I got a random loss somewhere else in this schedule. Is it Louisville? Is it Tennessee? Is it Auburn? Is it Florida? Who knows, right? South Carolina. I mean, again, not a overly difficult schedule, on paper, but you still got to go out and play the games. These are, when you're in the SEC, and we talk about the SEC year in and year out, everybody is a potential trap game, even Vanderbilt, right? Yeah. So you just got to be kind of cognizant of that. But I mean, I think we're spot on with it, Chris. Let me ask you this: what is the ceiling? What is the floor for the Wildcats this year?
Man, this can differ a lot. I think. I think the floor, if things don't go well offensively with Vandergrift back there, and they can't establish the run that well, I think maybe a 5-7, 6-6 type of season. And you just mentioned some of those teams. The problem with this schedule, it's not the most difficult we've seen as far as SEC goes, but you're at Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Texas. They're all on the road. Those three are. Florida, that's not an easy place to play by any means. Doesn't matter what the records are there. And then Auburn, we talked about that as well. So I think that's worst case scenario. Do I think that happens? Probably not. I think best case scenario as far as ceiling goes, man, I said 8-4. I think that's a damn ceiling. I would probably say 9-3, probably to cap that. I don't know if Kentucky can go like 10-2 or something like that. It's not because I don't believe in Stoops. It's just, man, a lot of tough road games here. And here's my other problem. I'm pretty high on Tennessee. Ole Miss is going to be a good team this season. They're going to be right in top 10 to start the season. Obviously Texas, right? And then you got your boys. So who I'm really high on. So I want to flip the script here though and ask you the same question, Christian. What's your thoughts on floor and ceiling with Kentucky this season?
No, I agree spot on with you. I think, it'd be real easy to say for the ceiling, 10 wins, but okay, so that means that you can lose to Georgia, or Texas, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or a combination, even if you beat them, you still got to play at Ole Miss. You still got to play at Tennessee, at the Swamp in Florida. And Chris, has his own thoughts about Florida. That's okay. But it's still the Swamp. It's still a tough environment, and it's not an easy situation to go into with that. I think 9 wins is probably the ceiling, and that's stretching the ceiling for them. That would mean, hey, you go through, maybe you lose to Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas, but you beat everybody else. Again, the other side of it too that I think a lot of people have to understand is, and we see it year in and year out, right? And that is having to transfer a quarterback who has very limited experience coming in. As talented as Vandergrift is, he hasn't really started, right? He's played very sparingly in games, but he hasn't really started and been asked to do what he's getting ready to be asked to do. So we see it last year with Notre Dame. They brought in Sam Hartman, right? And they struggled at times. When they had to have it, he struggled. Very rarely, just from a broader standpoint, do you see a transfer quarterback, lead his team into a college football playoff. Very rarely are you seeing, in their first year, very rarely are you seeing a freshman quarterback, which is a little bit different, a true freshman quarterback come in and lead their team into a college football playoff, right? There's some good seasons out there, but that's once you start looking at getting 7-8 wins with a first time starter, who's been around college for a little bit. I think that, especially with this Kentucky program, I think that's pretty spot on for the floor. I agree with you. 5-6 wins, I think is a good floor for him. I believe in Mark Stoops. I think that, he's elevated this program to a point where 5-6 wins is a disappointing year. Whereas if you go back 20 years ago, I mean, that wasn't the case, right? Kentucky almost expected that. Anything above that was pretty good. So, yeah, I'm right there with you, Chris. I think that, this is a situation where Kentucky should be really happy with a 7-8 win season this year. And if they can keep a lot of this talent, they can keep building upon it in this new NIL era of college football.